Many people passed the suspect, but he appeared to wait for his intended target.
The leader of a huge healthcare insurance company is dead, gunned down in what officials are calling a brazen targeted attack. And at the time of this recording, the suspect is still on the run. We are going to dig into everything we know so far about the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson on the streets of New York City. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, before we get into this, I have to quickly thank our sponsor, Upside, for helping us to produce this episode. And Upside's awesome, by the way. It's a free app, truly so easy to use, and it gets you cash back when you buy gas, groceries, food. This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. Like here, I used Upside to find a gas station. I claimed an offer, pay with my credit card at the pump, followed the steps on the app. I got cash back. And you can use Upside at all different kinds of places, restaurants, convenience stores. So to find out how much you could earn, you could click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. And make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR because you get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. So this is just a shocker. This happened in our backyard here in New York because New York police say a masked man shot 50-year-old Brian Thompson in the back early Wednesday morning as he was just heading to a conference at the Hilton Hotel in midtown Manhattan. You know what? I pass that area almost every week. This is a very highly populated area, tourists all over the place. The fact that this happened right there is just, again, shocking. Now, who was Thompson? He was the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. He was supposed to be attending an investor conference that was being put on by UHC's parent company, UnitedHealth Group. And as Thompson was approaching the hotel at around 6:45 a.m., and for those of you who don't know, in New York, that's the time that everybody's headed to work, NYPD says there's this masked man who had been apparently staking out the area for several minutes, approached Thompson from behind, and started shooting. Thompson was hit at least once in the back and once in the leg. NYPD leadership says that it took officers only 2 minutes to respond to the scene, but by then the shooter had already taken off, first running away, then using an e-bike and heading into Central Park, which is nearby. And by the way, as we record this Wednesday afternoon, this is kind of breaking news for us, there is currently a manhunt underway for this suspect, and police are offering up to a $10,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest in this case. Now, we have a couple of surveillance photos of the suspect that have been released, and one shows him holding up the gun, pointing it seemingly at Thompson. Another shows him turning a corner, heading north away from the crime scene on that e-bike that I mentioned. And while police say they do believe that this was a targeted shooting, they have not revealed any sort of motive here. Now, Thompson was rushed to the hospital and he has died. This is a tragedy that came out of nowhere. So to talk about everything that we know so far about Thompson, the shooter, the investigation, I have a special guest right now I want to bring in. I want to bring in retired NYPD detective Dave Sarni. Dave, thanks so much for coming on. And as I mentioned before we started, thank you so much for the work that you have done for this great city. My gosh, as I've said, I pass this area almost every week. When was the last time you saw a blatant shooting in midtown Manhattan like this?
Thanks for having me. This type of shooting, this was planned, as you can tell, and we haven't. I mean, this is as we've had shootings at Times Square that seem to be gelling from arguments or something like that. This was as brazen as you can do in the beginning of the rush hour of the area to see this shooting take place. It definitely is shocking to see. It is.
You mentioned something to me about the shift, about when officers have that shift, and this happens 6:45 in the morning, first thing in the morning. Talk to us about the shift for the police officers.
At times, I used to work what's called night watch for the detectives. The night watch is a tour from midnight to 8 a.m. And usually most of the bad things, unfortunately, happen around that 4 o'clock hour. Nothing good happens after 4 a.m. So when you hit that like 6:30, 7 o'clock time, you're looking to go home. And then the call comes in. And this is what we consider a heavy, in the sense that because it's midtown, it's going to be a high profile case. So, all eyes are on this and you're going to have to do the job as long as it takes to get it done. And one thing I have to say, detectives always do the best work they can, no matter how the hour is, no matter what day of the week, they're always out doing the best job they can. But night watch, boy, they were looking to go home Not today, guys, unfortunately.
Not today, not today. And let's talk about what we know in the lead up to this shooting. So according to the NYPD, they can see on surveillance cameras that the suspect was kind of milling around outside of the hotel for about 5 minutes before Thompson arrives. And Thompson, who's from Minnesota, where UnitedHealthcare is based, he was staying at a hotel across the street. So the NYPD says that he had been in New York since Monday, and the investors conference was scheduled to start at 8 a.m.
The shooter steps onto the sidewalk from behind the car. He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind, and shoots him in the back. The shooter then walks toward the victim and continues to shoot. It appears that the gun malfunctions as he clears the jam and begins to fire again. The shooter then flees on foot northbound into an alleyway between 54th Street and 55th Street. Once at West 55th Street, the shooter continues to walk westbound on Avenue of the Americas, where he gets onto an electric e-city bike and rides northbound on the Avenue of Americas towards Central Park.
Now, Dave, a few things I want to break down here. They say it was targeted. It seems to commit a shooting like this in this open area, a lot of witnesses, surveillance cameras. It almost seemed that, you would have to assume that the suspect here couldn't get Thompson in another area. Like, in other words, this was the only time he could get him alone. And also knowing his schedule, right? Knowing that he was going to be appearing for this event. That's what it seems. I think that's a fair guess, right?
Absolutely. There obviously is some planning to this. He knew the victim was going to be going somewhere. That conference was obviously well known to somebody. So we have to look at this, the perpetrator in the senses. How do you know the schedule? Not only how do you know the schedule, how do you know the location, what time he would be there? So that's the thing. He started earlier than most. You have a conference at 8 a.m. Usually don't see CEOs come to the conference so early. They might come a little bit later. The victim, unfortunately, had no security details, so he felt no threats available to him at that time, nothing present, at least in his mind. So no security for him. You're having to watch. I mean, this perp was there. He was there earlier, so he had an idea of what time he was going. Was anyone going to the hotel desk asking for him, or at least had an idea of his schedule? To know the victim is going to be there, there was obviously some planning that he already knew that he was going to be there at that time. And when you look at it, you're like, and that's why the detectives, you're like, why now? Why at this time? So why? And that's where you come in with that idea of, he gets him alone, but this is the best time to get him is by himself, crossing the street. And unfortunately, he shot there.
No. How bold is this? There was not even no hesitation. The gun seems to jam, and the shooter just fixes it and keeps on shooting.
Yeah, that's the thing. The positioning in which there is, it looks like he has some sort of training, some sort of understanding of how the firearm works, because you're not going to clear a jam. Very calm, cool, collected in that sense that you're going to clear the jam out after a shooting. A lot of times you're dealing with someone who's panicked. They may just take the gun and flee. But you're looking also how determined was the shooter to make sure that his target was killed or eliminated. He tried to shoot him again.
And by the way, I wanted to ask you how difficult it is to process a crime scene in that kind of open urban area, because when officers responded to the scene, they said they found 3 live 9mm rounds, 3 9mm shell casings, some evidence there. You have surveillance cameras. I imagine you have witnesses. What goes on into processing a scene like that? Is it difficult given that environment?
It can be difficult, but the benefit of the arrival on scene immediately, you're going to try to secure it as quick as possible. So that's why the crime scene tape will go up at the immediate area. Then you actually make when you make your crime scene, you're going to make it as large as possible, to try to make sure that you secure anything that might be forensically involved or probative evidence, such as the cell phone that they found. And the rounds, the one thing about it, it's early in the morning. There's not that many people available around in the street, so that may not be disturbed quickly. But in an environment, if there's more crowded, you might have a difficulty. But this was a little more situated early enough in the morning to do.
And by the way, that is an area where there's office buildings, there's hotels, there are people about even at that time. And what we talk about, the suspect, I want to go into this a little bit more. He's described as a light-skinned male wearing what appears to be a dark gray sweatshirt with a distinctive gray backpack, although what exactly was distinctive about the bag wasn't specified. A cell phone, as you mentioned, was recovered from the alley he apparently ran into. Police are still investigating whether it is related to this shooting, and officers are reviewing camera footage to not only figure out where the shooter went after firing the shots, but also where he came from. And when it comes to that e-bike that I mentioned, investigators say that the company does have GPS locators on the bike so they can be tracked. It's just not clear how far the suspect may have gone before potentially ditching that getaway vehicle. Two things I want to ask you about that, Dave. Are you surprised he was able to escape? I mean, the response time from police was 2 minutes, so that's great. But are you surprised this suspect was able to get away so quickly?
Within a 2-minute time frame, you're responding to the scene. So sometimes officers who are responding, and we try to do this, is actually delay a response. Once you have an immediate response and somebody arriving on scene, you want to start canvassing. Once you have to get an identify of a suspect. So I don't know what the radio run had as far as a suspect out there, so they would start canvassing immediately. But what you're dealing with the shots fired, individual injured, so you're going to respond to the scene as quickly as possible. They did. Within that time frame, by the time the 911 call comes in, the response gets there an extra 2 minutes or so. That person could be out in the wind within that 2-minute time frame. And that's why you create a tertiary perimeter later on as you get there to see if you get someone who's a witness who can clearly identify, or at least identify clothing.
Let me ask you this. At the time of this recording, they haven't caught the suspect. Chances they'll be able to catch him relatively quickly, considering, you have to wonder, is this person even still in New York? What are the different ways they could have gotten out of the city? And talk to me. The city's quite large. So talk to me about what you think the success rate will be in actually apprehending this individual.
Well, you have to look at what he did. Apparently, he went into Central Park. At the time, Central Park, you're going to have an extensive canvas. He had a knapsack on him. Was that knapsack containing clothing, which he could change into? What else was on him that he already afforded that escape? He gets an e-bike. I'm probably gonna think he either ripped it out of the well. I don't think he put his credit card in to get it. But once you lose the car, once you lose the vehicle, which is the bike, he goes into the park. Now you have to look at where in the park he went, and you're going to have to, again, do an extensive video canvas around the park to see where he exited from. And not only that, is he in a change of clothing? Because that's a concern also. If this is a person who's a professional individual, even not as professional as we may, it all depends on, what we consider professional. He had a bag with him. Was that bag containing clothes and materials that will allow him to escape and change his clothes? We've seen that happen in the past where perpetrators have a change of clothing. They'll wear something underneath, get rid of it. So that's one aspect. But I will tell you this, the Detective Bureau, the NYPD, all hands on deck on this. This is a high-profile investigation, high-profile homicide. They're going to do the best they can with what they got.
By the way, the chief of detectives reiterated at a news conference that they don't yet have or know a motive here, but police sources told the New York Times that Thompson, he had recently received threats. The exact nature of those threats are unknown, and Thompson's wife, Paulette, told NBC News that her husband had mentioned that there were some people that had been threatening him. She also told NBC News that while she didn't have any details about that, there may have been issues connected to insurance coverage. Again, he was a very high-profile individual in this sense. Investigators said that they were searching Thompson's hotel room, speaking with his colleagues to try to get any more information about any possible dangers. But that goes back to the conversation. He didn't have private security with him. I'm sure that will be a question that comes up if he really was receiving some sort of threats, why that wasn't the case. And by the way, let me couple that. There was a reporter at the news conference who even asked if Thompson was traveling with any sort of security detail, and the police said he wasn't. So what do you make of that, Dave? If there were threats, but not enough to warrant security, it does become a question of how, and we don't know, again, what the motive is, what's going on here. But assuming it is connected to such threats and no security, what do you take away from that?
Well, we could look at it this way, where the victim did not think the threats were valid. No one else thought they were valid, at least in his mind or in his company. So he thought it was all right to be traveling on his own. Primary responsibility is going to be apprehending the suspect. Once you identify a suspect, identify him, arrest him, then we could look at the motive. And I'll tell you now, you have people in the field on a search, and you also have detectives going through his background, social media, anything along the lines that would be determined a threat. So there's going to be a very extensive investigation on many angles. So we're not just looking at the apprehension is one aspect, but we're now going to have detectives working on the possible motives, which may identify the person they're looking for.
Let me just put a bow on this. So not surprisingly, UnitedHealth Group had canceled the investors conference with the parent company CEO announcing that there was a very serious situation going on, that they would be needing to end the event. And Brian Thompson, he had been CEO of UnitedHealthcare since 2021. He had worked within the company for 20 years. According to his LinkedIn page, Thompson had previously overseen the Medicare and retirement arms of the company, as well as government programs, before being made or appointed to chief executive officer. And the Minnesota Star-Tribune reports that Thompson, he was survived now by his wife and 2 sons, one in high school, another who recently graduated. A really sad, tragic situation. And UnitedHealthcare's parent company released a statement after Thompson's death, saying, "We are deeply saddened and shocked at the passing of our dear friend and colleague, Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. Brian was a highly respected colleague and friend to all who worked with him. We are working closely with the New York Police Department and ask for your patience and understanding during this difficult time. Our hearts go out to Brian's family and all who were close to him." Dave, one more thing I wanted to mention about this. This is New York City. How tough is it for someone to bring a gun in and commit a shooting like this?
We've seen the police department take almost 2,000 guns off the street as of this year. Having a gun in New York is not unusual. You have to realize there are bad people out there. There's good people with firearms who are legally owning it, and then you have those who illegally own it. I have to take it back to the victim. Sometimes when detectives do their work, our primary responsibility, primary goal at the time is to apprehend the shooter and to make an arrest and then develop a case with that. But I don't think anyone loses sight of the victim and the family. This is during the holiday season, a tragic circumstance. We don't know the mindset of the perpetrator at this time, but I will tell you, guns are available in New York City. It's not difficult to receive one, not difficult to retrieve one. Ghost guns, stolen guns, it's not that difficult. But realize this, the work that police do to try to do their best and try their best to keep the citizens of New York City safe, those who visit and those who reside here, is paramount as a mission. The detectives will work tirelessly to find the perpetrator that did this, to get him into custody and develop the case to make sure that the prosecution is to the fullest extent. So that's one thing we'll do. Guns will be out there, but you know what? Detectives do their job, and they will do the best job they can with what they do.
And as a lifelong New Yorker, I will say NYPD is some of the best out there. I know this is a difficult case for them. I know this is a difficult case for all, and just a really, really shocking and upsetting situation that, again, came out of nowhere. Our hearts and prayers go out to Brian's family, and we will continue to follow this and see where it goes. Dave Sarni, again, thank you so much for taking the time and breaking it down for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.